Good afternoon. I am Vanessa Thomas with the 12 o'clock news on the street 919 FM and online Facebook and YouTube, sponsored by the Sea Champion. In the headlines, COVID-19 threatens to send this country into a third wave of the virus. Bar owners plead for restrictions to be lifted on bars. A Point 14 man is chopped to death in front of his young son and girlfriend. An internationally double mutant COVID variant found in India. And now the news in detail. Trinidad and Tobago is on the verge of a third wave of the coronavirus, and there is still no word on when this country will receive its first tranche of the vaccines from the COVAX facility. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Roshan Parasram is hoping to hear some positive news on this in the coming weeks.
The Honorable Minister would have said end of March, thereabouts, is our timeline. We haven't received anything stating otherwise as yet, so we hold to that sort of time frame. So let us hope in the coming weeks we shall hear an actual date that we'll be receiving our first tranche out of the COVAX vaccine.
In February, there was a significant increase in new positive cases, and even more so in March. Dr. Parasram said for the last week alone, there were 70 new cases recorded.
What we are seeing is a rolling average of 10.28 over the last 7 days. 70 cases over the last epidemiological week compared to 37 the week before, represents an 89% increase over that period. 34 cases accrued over the weekend alone.
Meanwhile, an elderly man is the latest COVID fatality. In the Ministry of Health's latest COVID update yesterday, it said the man had pre-existing medical conditions. Also, 4 more people have contracted the virus from samples taken between March 20th and March 23rd. In other news, the Barkeepers and Operators Association says its members are desperate for restrictions to be lifted on bars. It has been 1 year since bars had a buy and go policy implemented, and this has impacted negatively on bar owners and their livelihoods. President of the association, Satish Munasar, admits that some bar owners have not been following protocols. He says while he does not condone this behavior, it is unfair to see gatherings and the consumption of alcohol taking place all over the country while there are still restrictions on bars.
Why are we being restricted while it's allowed everywhere else? And also, when it's allowed in public, it's also allowed in an uncontrolled environment, whereas in a bar we could have some measure of control over it.
Mr. Munasar says bars thrive on gatherings and the sale of alcohol to provide for their families, and it is very disheartening what bar owners are being forced to endure. He says the restrictions that continue on bars have caused bar owners to sell alcohol illegally.
Couple of weeks, you have seen also massive gatherings in like mall car parks. Even under the flyover in front of Grand Bazaar, you would see large congregations of people liming, playing music out of their vehicles and consuming alcohol. So bars are basically being restricted for something that is allowed everywhere else.
In more news, masked men stormed into a house in Point 14 on Tuesday and demanded cash and drugs before chopping to death Martin Patton, 34. Patton was dragged out of his bed and forced to kneel in the living room as he was brutally chopped about the body. His 17-year-old girlfriend and a 4-year-old son were locked inside a bedroom guarded by a man armed with a cutlass. The incident occurred at Walker Street, Egypt Village at around 3:30 a.m. Patton's mother spoke to the media.
Get killed. And when we come, well, the police and them was here already, so I didn't get to see him. How he was and thing.
Mrs. Patton believes that the crime situation is getting worse and says people are being attacked because of what they have.
Will come to you when you have. Understand? They will come to get at you because you have the sin you have.
Internationally, a new double mutant variant of the coronavirus has been detected from samples collected in India. Officials are checking if the variant where two mutations come together in the same virus may be more infectious or less affected by vaccines. Over 10,000 samples from 18 Indian states also showed up to 771 cases of known variants. Officials say the variants are not linked to a spike in cases in India. India reported 47,262 cases and 275 deaths on Wednesday, the sharpest daily rise this year. And that was the 12 o'clock news on the street, 919 FM, and online Facebook and YouTube, sponsored by the Sea Champion. Recapping the headlines. COVID-19 threatens to send this country into a third wave of the virus. Bar owners plead for restrictions to be lifted on bars. A Point 14 man is shot to death in front of his young son and girlfriend. An internationally double mutant COVID variant found in India. Stay tuned for news headlines at 3 o'clock and major news at 4. I am Vanessa Thomas. Good afternoon.
From the street. News from the street. 919fm.com.
Broadcasting from Trinidad to the world. The street.